Welcome to Damon Does the Six Questions, where the same six questions can tell a unique story. I am your host, Damon, father of two, husband of one, and leader of this here Demodcast. Make sure you go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe to your podcast. Find Damon Does the Six Questions. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you leave a review, whether it says mission accomplished or I always feel like somebody's watching me and I have no privacy. Oh. Doesn't matter what you leave. But what that does is help drive us up the rankings so more people can see us. Thank you very much. And now to the guest, to our honored guest. Our guest today is Gilbert Corsey. Gilbert is an Emmy Award winning news anchor and reporter for WDRB News here in Louisville, Kentucky, and a personal friend of mine. And guess what? That is his side hustle. You want to find out more? In 3, 2, 1, take it away, past me. I am here live in location with Gilbert Corsey, WDRB news anchor. Thank you so much. Thank you. Personally, the coolest part about your story is the fact that you are an award-winning journalist, but it's kind of your side hustle because you want to be a professional wrestling announcer.
Yeah. So
that's not something you hear very often.
News by day, wrestling by night. That's the way it goes.
I think to me, that is the coolest thing.
But I can say that, professional wrestling, what some folks call sports entertainment, it has been the greatest gift to my broadcast journalism career because there are dual skills that I don't think you realize exist until you flex both muscles using both veins. So many days I go literally from off the set on the news at 4 to into the arena, wrestling arena, and on to broadcasting for professional wrestling. And I always wanted to be a professional wrestling broadcaster. I distinctly remember 8 years old getting immersed in what was going on in wrestling around the time. This time it was Hogan's first retirement storyline and Macho and Elizabeth, WrestleMania 8. Yep. So, and I remember the lead up to it, but this is back in the days when you had 4 pay-per-views a year and you had to wait 3 or 4 months for that pay-per-view if you didn't get it to come out on VHS, Coliseum Home Video, and then go stock your local video stores to figure out which one got it, right?
Yes.
So I remember being 8 and the lead. I didn't know when wrestling came on. I'm a loose wrestling fan at that point in time, right? So my brother watched wrestling. I have faint memories of just being in the room when wrestling was on, but not really understanding what was going on. So my first memory and storyline is all the lead up for WrestleMania 8. I was watching, and then probably about 3 or 4 months later, I'll tell you exactly. It goes back to my brother because he got grounded, and so he got grounded because he got bad grades, and so he spent the entire summer in my room playing Monopoly. What he really was doing was monopolizing my television. And so we spent a lot of time, I remember, playing Monopoly and watching the Summer Olympics. And, VHS tapes and things that had come out. So I rented WrestleMania 8 because I saw it at the video store one weekend, and I remembered the lead up, but not really knowing how it turned out because I didn't know Primetime came on Mondays at 9. I didn't know Superstars was syndicated on Saturday afternoons. I would just watch wrestling when I came across it, right? And so I watched the pay-per-view and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I remember talking to my dad and being like, well, what's his job? And his was Brian Gumbel, Bob Costas. Because these were the people who were running the NBC sports desk for the Olympics. Yeah. And they were like, oh, they're sports broadcasters. And I was like, wait, somebody gets paid to watch sports and then talk about it? That's a job? And I was like, I'm going to do this for wrestling. And it's going to be amazing. And my mind never changed. As an adult, I can see why wrestling appealed to me because it was the perfect synergy of things that I enjoyed. So I liked sports, I liked athleticism, I liked competing, but then I also had this artsy-fartsy part to myself, right, where I was super creative. I was always involved in choir and theater as a child, right? So it was the perfect blend of the artistic side of me with the athletic side of me.
Interesting.
So if you're not going to wrestle, what I knew is that I didn't like pain. And so
That's fair.
if you're not going to wrestle, the way to be a broadcaster in wrestling, I found, was to go through the news track. Because I don't know if you know how many. Michael Cole used to work for CBS Radio. Sean Mooney was in news, went to wrestling, went back to news. Jonathan Coachman started in news, went to wrestling, went on to ESPN. Todd Grisham, Gene Okerlund came from News Radio. Right. Lee Marshall came from News Radio. So I knew that if I wanted to be a broadcaster, it seemed to be that the news track was the way to go. So when I was coming out of college, we were just out of the Attitude Era. And people were like, oh, God. I mean, it was Jerry Springer and professional wrestling. They were looked at about on the same level, right? So there was no credibility in doing professional wrestling and news at the same time. They were like, no, we don't want any of it, right? So I spent like I had worked for Portland Wrestling in college, my senior year of college. I was driving back and forth.
How far was the drive?
6 hours. 6 hours, tape television once a month. I get up at 6 in the morning to get there by noon. That was the call time. Do all your pre-tapes and stuff like that between noon and 3. Doors open at 5. Straight tape. They're usually done by 9. And after the after the shows, all the boys would go to Acropolis, which is what they like to call a steakhouse that has naked women. Not a strip club, a steakhouse that has naked women.
That's an interesting distinction.
Right? They wouldn't go to the strip club, they go to the steakhouse.
That have naked women.
That has naked women.
Oh, I know.
Right? So, and you know the way that wrestling works, and so you just want to fit in with the locker room, with the boys, right? You want to be ingrained in the fraternity. And I remember I was in a fraternity in college, right? So I was familiar how this went, right? I'm the out-of-towner. I'm coming in from 6 hours away. I know nobody in the locker room.
Yeah.
And I would go to Acropolis just to, like, be seen and to see. Don't judge me, I was 20.
I said nothing.
But here's the deal. I would have to drive. WSU was in far southeastern Washington State University. Portland is below Seattle, right? So my parents, I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. So I would get up at 6 in the morning, drive to the show, call time by noon, because that was the distance from Pullman, Washington to Portland, Oregon. Do the show. Go to Acropolis afterwards, then leave probably about 1 or 2 in the morning and drive back to my parents' house in the suburbs of Seattle, 3 hours. Sleep in my bed for about 3 hours, so about 7 o'clock in the morning, get up and drive back to Pullman, Washington, which was 4.5 hours from my parents' house. Yeah, and I did that for my senior year of college, and for the most of the year for free. The first time the promoter paid me, I think it was a combination of, well, kid, you've been coming here for 9 months. You haven't missed. It was the the taping after I graduated college and my birthday all in one. So I don't know why he gave me that $50, but I was like, yeah, my first day in wrestling.
You were finally, and you became a professional.
Yes, right?
Yes.
At that point in time. And then like 3 days later, I packed my bags after I graduated, because I just graduated, and moved across the country to go try and work for the WWE.
Actually, we've already answered question number 1. So tell me about your time with Impact.
I've had some opportunities on many different occasions to work with Impact.
Okay.
I think it was Bound for Glory 2013, 2014. You have to like go back and look. I don't remember the exact year. OVW and Impact was Impact's developmental at the time. Al was our executive producer, and John Gaborik was VP of Talent and Television.
Okay.
I may be wrong on his title, but Gaborik was there. Bischoff was still involved.
Okay.
Hulk was still involved, and so this is legitimately the way it went down. Impacted a set of tapings. This is remember where they had left the impact zone in Florida and they were doing television across the country at different venues, and they would do one live and then they tape one after. And so they did that in Louisville, and I bumped into and OVW was Impact's developmental at the time, so our whole locker room is backstage, and I just bumped into Eric Bischoff. And I will wholeheartly say I was not searching him out or anything like that. I bumped into Eric Bischoff. I saw him backstage. I shook his hand and I was like, "Hi, I'm Gilbert. My name's Gilbert Corsey." He's like, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "I'm a broadcaster." I had literally come from work, so I'm still wearing a suit and tie. I was like, "I'm a broadcaster. I've worked in 4 media markets in the last, at that point in time, let's see here, 13, so we're talking about 7-8 years into my career at that point in time. I worked in 4 media markets over the last 7 years. I'm the lead broadcaster for your developmental OVW. It's like, "Do you have a reel?" And I was like, "Not on me, but I can certainly get you one in the next, couple of days." So I cut together a reel. And that's how unprepared I am. Like, this is when people are walking around with like their stuff on a thumb drive, or walking around with their reels on DVD and stuff like that, or have links that they can shoot off right away. Like, I was like, "Oh, let me go put something together," right? And so I sent it off, and then transitions started happening with Impact, and Hulk and Eric were going away, and I didn't think anything else of it, right?
Yeah.
And then John, one day, Gaborik, Big, was at OVW one week, and he pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, got your stuff, and we'd like to start using you." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Yes, please." And now here's the thing that really got me. Big was working for the WWE, remember, right? He was like a producer on Tough Enough, and he was in television with WWE. He said, "I knew you then, but we thought that this news thing was what you wanted to do, and this was just like a side hustle." And I was like, "What?"
Oh my gosh!
Right? I was
wow.
like, "No, that's absolutely not the case," right? They wound up flying me to Bound for Glory in San Diego, whatever year San Diego was, 2013, 2014. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was going to be doing that weekend. I wound up doing some interviews on the pre-show that was on Spike, and then an interview with the Bromans after they won the tag team titles on the pay-per-view. Big was like, "We'll be calling you again." They did. Within 2 weeks, they were doing a set of tapings in Cincinnati. And this time, here's a story I won't forget. It's when Big says, "Go tell Tanae that you're going to call Explosion tonight." And I was like, "What?" This is where you wish you had television and you could see my face right now. Because my face right now is the same as it was then.
Yeah,
Let's just be candid. Lots of times you think it's like, there are few broadcasting spots to be had. And I did not know what was going on behind the scenes. I think behind the scenes at Impact at the time, it was known that they were looking to add a third person, because Todd Kinley had already come in and gone out, right? It was either they were looking to add a third or to move on from Mike Tenay, which I don't understand, because why are these? That's a legendary voice,
right?
Like, and the reason that they call him the professor. Why would you? I never wanted to take anybody's spot. I wanted to sit underneath the learning tree, and hang out and be mentored by you until you decide that you're ready to hang it up, right?
Right.
But that's not the way announcers feel when they see another broadcaster, particularly a young broadcaster.
Sure.
So I remember talking to Jeremy Borash about it, because Borash and and Mike Tenay did Explosion. And for those who don't know, Explosion was like the B show, internationally syndicated show of Impact. I tell JB that Big has asked me to go tell Mike Tenay that I'm going to call Explosion. And JB, to his credit, was like, that's not a good idea. Why don't you let me take care of that? And that was the end of it. JB, Jeremy Borash, we talked a little bit before. Like, it wasn't even long. It was like 10 minutes, not 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then we went out there and we did our thing. So I called a couple episodes or a couple weeks worth of Explosions. And then Big was like, I like it. You'll hear from us soon. Then on New Year's Day, he sent me a text message out of the blue saying, we've got big plans for you this year. Happy New Year. You'll be hearing from us. And that's the last time I heard from him.
Wow.
So what happened a couple weeks later? Josh Matthews was released. I'm not sure if he was released or quit. Bottom line is he was no longer with the WWE. And within days, he was with Impact. That's wrestling.
Sure.
If you know anything about wrestling, right? Creative and a direction can change until you were in the middle of the ring and it's happening. then expect it to change. That's why I tell talent all the time, right? It's creative, and the eraser is real. And so until you were in the middle of the ring and it is actually happening, be prepared for it to change.
Right. Be prepared. Be prepared for anything. Just be over prepared.
And so a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to be a part of the Final Deletion thing. Mm-hmm. Whatever chapter of that it was. James Long, who's a Paradise in OVW. He's a producer for Impact for several years, and now he works for the WWE. He's a very good friend of mine, good guy, right? And they needed somebody to play a news anchor in their fictional Final Deletion world, right? So,
yes.
That was cool. I was brought back, and I got to do some spots there. It was sometime in December of some year, I think 16, 17, I'm really not sure, but the opening voice on Impact was myself at this fictional anchor desk, talking about the world ending unless the Hardys save it. Right?
Oh my gosh,
right?
That's insane. I love it.
Yeah. And then Impact and OVW came back together as a developmental territory this last year, and it was called a joint event called Clash at the Bluegrass with Josh and Cyrus. Well, it's not Cyrus anymore, right?
Don Callis. Yeah.
Don Callis, right? I'm showing my age. And so, yeah, there's a relationship there, and I've had the opportunity and been fortunate enough to work with them on a handful of occasions. There was a time in 2013, 2014 where I really thought that I would be more used as a regular broadcaster.
Sure.
But I've seen enough in wrestling to know anything can change at any point in time. And again, I am so fortunate and blessed in my news career. What was really interesting was because I was in this silly world of professional wrestling, I was hyper sensitive about being as great as I could possibly be and striving to be better than my peers in news, because I didn't want anybody to look at me. I can't have somebody look at me doing the 4 o'clock news or when I'm talking about death, doom, destruction. Like we're taping this right after the presidential impeachment trial ended. When that trial ended and they said not guilty, you dropped into the news at 4 and it was Gilbert Corsey and Elizabeth Woolsey on the anchor desk. I cannot have my viewers look at me when I am sharing what is worldwide important information and not believe what I'm saying, because I work in this world of professional wrestling. So I have to scream excellence from the rooftop in news to continue to work in professional wrestling. I've been fortunate to win a number of awards for broadcasting, right? But it's so many of them came out of wrestling. It was a story that started because I heard about it from a fan in wrestling, or it was on a wrestler that had an interesting other life, or just one of the Matt Capitelli, his second round with cancer was so tragic, right? But I wanted to share his journey and what he was up against, and he really opened up his doctor's appointments and his home and his heart And I did a story with him, and it was on my compilation in 2018 that won an Emmy for Best Reporter in our region, right? So that came out of wrestling. There was a story I did early on when I got here on Michael Hayes, who was a soldier who survived an IED explosion that killed several other people in Ramadi. Burns over half his body, lost his leg, and that was part of a compilation. So it was one of three pieces that won an Emmy for Best Writer, right? They're even the people at our concession stand in our ticket booth, Kim and Mark Schneider, right? She was donating a kidney to him because he was in kidney failure.
Wow.
So we call that story The Vow, and because I knew them from wrestling, they opened up the operating room to me. I got to interview the surgeon as he's taking Mark's dead kidney out, and followed the kidney into the other operating room to when they pulled it out of Kim, right? So we call that story The Vow. That won some trophies as well. So I mean, all of those came out of wrestling.
That's insane.
Right? So I also say that wrestling's been a gift because it's extemporaneous speaking, right?
Right.
I don't have a script, right? I'm reacting to what is happening in front of me, and I'm organizing.
Say that again. There are going to be wrestling fans listening to this. Say that again.
I don't have a script. I am reacting to what is happening in front of me.
That is what is supposed to happen in wrestling, period, not performance. Soapbox done. Go ahead.
So but that, you have to flex a muscle where you can organize thoughts in your brain, right? You can organize, really, I call it producing the booth when you're the lead man. Because whether you got 2 or 3 commentators there, it's not about what you're saying, it's what you're lobbing up for the next person to say, so that other person will say this, so you can really come back around to get to the point that you want to get to.
Wow.
Because it's like you're in wrestling, you speak in sound bites, right?
Right.
But sometimes commentary is the yes and game. So you may have 24 to 30 seconds worth of stuff that you need to get out, right? So you got to lob up your color guy and your analyst or whoever's at the desk with you so that they will go with you so you can keep those sound bites short.
Interesting.
I call it producing the booth.
That makes a lot of sense.
To be one step ahead. Not about what you're doing, it's about where you're going next and next after that. This, that, and there. When I teach it in class, I tell it this, that, and there. So many times talent get caught up in this. This is stupid. I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like this. But if you are producing the whole kit and caboodle, you're not worried about this. Sometimes you're doing this because that needs to happen, because ultimately you got to get to there, right? When you are thinking about the big picture, you're trying to get there. Don't get stuck in this.
Question number 2. What do you wish you had known when you had first started out?
In news, I wish I knew how to do my job. I was a terrible reporter, and don't even put me on the anchor desk when I first started. I was terrible at my job because I ultimately wanted to be a wrestling guy, right? So I had to the job I got was in news. So I had to learn to be a reporter. I had to learn how to dress for news. Like, it was my voice, and my voice isn't deep now, but imagine 6 octaves higher. I still have the first live shot I ever did. I'm like, well, Wayne, police say
Wow.
the suspect, right? Like, it's bad. Somebody hired me for potential, certainly not talent. So I had to learn how to do this job.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And in wrestling,
real quick, did you feel you were prepared, like your schooling prepared you, or why did you feel unprepared?
Example, Broadcast 465 is the last broadcast class when I went to WSU that you took, right? That was when you actually do the news. The expectation for that full semester was to do 8 packages in 16 weeks. I did 7 packages in my first week in a real newsroom.
Wow.
Right? So there is nothing in college that prepares you to do this job for real, right? And look, my very first day in Abilene, Texas, a transformer blew up on a utility employee who was trying to repair it. And all the other reporters were out, and it came across the scanner, and they were like, "You, go." And I was like, "Me? What?" I don't even know where to start, right? I mean, I have no idea even where to start at that point in time in my career, right? Fortunately, I worked in a newsroom in a very small market that had some great, what I call institutional knowledge. Photographers who had been shooting for 20, 30 years in that small market. So they knew everything about this small town, and they had worked with more small market, fresh out of college reporters and trained them than they could care to remember. And I was taken care of by good journalists, good visual storytellers. What do I wish I had learned? What do I wish I'd known in professional wrestling? I don't want to call it like locker room etiquette, because I'm I know to shake everybody's hand and stay out of the way but be visible and right like that. The navigate those waters. I didn't know because I didn't have any, like in wrestling if you're a wrestling talent, you got a whole bunch of wrestling talent pouring into you, like this is how it goes when you go on the road and you work somewhere else. If you're a broadcasting talent, I didn't have that. Dean Hill was a great mentor, but he didn't tell me what to do when I got backstage at Impact.
Oh, man.
Nor did Kenny Bolin. I mean, those were my broadcast partners at the time.
Yeah.
So, or even first off, before that, I had worked with ROH and Kevin Kelly before that. Announcers just inherently, I'm not like this. I'm so welcoming to other broadcasters that come into OVW, because I'm like, again, it's just OVW, and it's just OVW. Like, this isn't my, the difference is when you go work with one of those national promotions, that's their paycheck. Right? Somebody comes into OVW, they're not affecting my paycheck. They're not affecting my livelihood, right? So when you go into a national promotion, they're like, what are you doing here? They're not going to create another spot. Are you coming to take mine? Right? That is inherently the tension that is there.
Yeah.
Even when it's so non-existent, because I'm like, again, I just want to sit under the learning tree and take these best practices that I can use to grow myself. You can do. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I'm not in this world where it has to be one or the other. There can be room for both of us in the end.
Right.
There's room for both of us in the end. So I wish that somebody, plain and simply, direct answer, I wish somebody would have told me that if you're, sometimes other broadcasters won't talk to you. And wrestlers, they do it to each other too. We'll call it in the ring. They don't tell you anything until you go out to the ring, because they want to see what your natural instincts are. I wasn't expecting that. So I remember, like, when I went to work with ROH, this is like 2011, 2012, maybe 2012, I think. Same thing. I had 2 matches to call, I think. And Kevin Kelly, I kept trying to get with him beforehand. He'd be like, no, in a minute. Until he kept in a minuting me until the next thing we were going. we were calling it. I had the same experience with Josh as well, Josh Matthews, when we did the Clash in the Bluegrass event. The difference was I was a much more seasoned broadcaster at that point in time, right? So when I worked with Kevin Kelly, I was a year maybe into weekly wrestling at OVW, right?
Okay.
It's a terrible call. Yeah, I was not good at any means whatsoever. And when I was Clash of the Bluegrass, I just wanted to know what, it was an Impact pay-per-view, right? So I'm saying, hey, Josh and Don, like, this is your show. I'm so glad to just have the opportunity to learn from you and be a part of it. What role do you want me to play at the commentary table? Do you want me to quarterback? Do you want me to be the play-by-play, the lead guy, producing the booth and lobbing you up? Do you want me to be the analyst? Obviously, Don's going to be color. I mean, ultimately, in having both myself and Josh Matthews there, you have two cooks, right? And you can't have that many cooks in the kitchen sometimes. But I was completely prepared to be like, okay, even though this is in Davis Arena and this is half OVW's roster on this card, this is, you are at my booth, and I am saying whatever you want me to do, I can do it. Just let me know.
Right.
Never said anything. I'll get with you in a minute. And then right before we go through the curtain, he's like, why don't you do play-by-play tonight? But that's just something I guess broadcasters do to each other. I was surprised by it. I wish somebody would have told me that. I wish I would have known that. That's a thing that they do because they want to see what you're like on your toes.
As you can tell, Gilbert and I had such a great time talking that the interview has to be split up in two. So we'll see you in 2 weeks for the conclusion with Gilbert Corsey. But before you go, please remember, go to that purple icon for Apple Podcasts. Go to that green icon for Spotify, or whatever the color the icon is for whatever podcast user you use. And make sure you log in, put a 5-star review. Make sure you leave something in the review. It could say, we will rock you. Doesn't matter really what it says. It just helps us get seen by more people so we can keep rising and growing the what am I calling this now? Growing the show. That's it. Anyway, until next time, again, we're going to see you in 2 weeks with Gilbert Corsey. Part 2, we're going to see you in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we're going to have Gilbert Corsey back on the show. So until next time, until whenever you listen to this, until tomorrow, until the next day, hopefully you're staying safe. Please, by all means, see it, hear it, speak it, live.
I hope you had a great day, everyone.